Anyway.
As far as the minimal hard drive space, that one's kind of subjective and depends on what you're going to be doing with the system.
Well, it's like, and they were asking recommended. Like in this case, they were open with SUSE, and according to the SUSE page, they're like 500 megabytes at a minimum, which.
Was that hard drive or was that RAM?
No, that was hard drive. It was like, apparently if you do a really stripped down SUSE install, you can fit it on 500 megabytes. So I'm like, okay.
Nothing else. Yeah. Was that the KDE or the GNOME version?
I forget. That's but the recommended was at least a few gig, which it's fine. I mean, you know, and this really is, when it comes to Linux, you know, what distro you're installing. I mean, what is it? How much space does damn small Linux use as a late? It's ridiculously small.
It's something like 50 megs, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, oh, do you have 100 megabytes worth of free space? You're fine. You can put Linux on that thing.
Assuming you never want to do anything else.
Yeah. Well, and that comes down to part 2 of this. When you look at the recommended and minimum specs on a Linux side, it's like turning the Windows box over and going, how much hard drive space do I need to install Windows? And the reality, and the same thing with OS X and everything else. This is how much space this takes up. But do you want to be able to save files? Do you want to be able to do other things, yada yada and so forth? Now, in the case with a multi-boot system, we're assuming you have at least another 130 gig plus partition somewhere with Windows or something on it, which you can save files to, so that's not so much a concern there. But you do need space to install applications and to run the temporary swap file things for those applications. My honest recommendation, and I don't know if you have a different number in mind, I found if you do it on less than 20 gig and you're a power user, you'll run into space issues. Even though the distro itself will only take up a few gig. But then again, I'm doing things like video editing and messing with really large temp files and other things. You could probably get away with as little as 6 gig.
Yeah. When I'm setting up a VM, I almost always do it right at 20 gigs, if not 30. But hard drive space is really, I mean, it's, unless you're using an older machine, hard drive space is pretty much, you know, pennies on the dollar as what it used to be.
Well, in the case of this person, they were doing a tri-boot system. So they had a whole section on the hard drive dedicated to XP, a whole section dedicated to, I forget if it was Vista or 7, and then they're trying to put Linux on top of that. I'm like, okay, yeah, space can get a little tight there. It's like, because Windows is a space hog. You need gigs of free space in Windows so it can have that swap file not crash the system.
Let's see, on my current system, I've got 20 gigs available, or 20 gigs on my root partition, and 10 gigs used. But I've got how many games installed, I've got how many, you know, this is my machine that I use all the time, and that's without my home directory. With my home directory, I'm using an extra 300 and some gig.
Okay, like I said, I use way more than most people.
Right.
My root directory's got about 3 gig free, and it is about half a terabyte. Excuse me, it's about 100 gigabytes. But I've got a lot of stuff in there most people wouldn't, from other projects and other things. My home directory is 1.5 terabytes, 1.1 of which is free right now. And then I have another drive split up into another half terabyte drive split up into a Windows directory and a smaller FAS3 directory, just because there are those few programs that refuse to acknowledge that they can write to larger hard drives, so I have this other directory over there linked into my home directory, so they're happy, so they can write properly. But like I said, I'm losing, and that's not counting the storage and other crap, but it's, I think sounds like we're both agreeing. 15 to 20 gigs probably a good place called start for just screwing around. Okay.
And that's 15 and 20 gigs, assuming that you're going to do something more than just web browsing and email and anything that would require installing games. And
I'm always hesitant to use that argument just because there's a lot of people who sit down and is like, well, I'm just going to try Linux.
Right.
And it's like, that's all I'm going to do in it. I'm just going to do, a little Thunderbird, a little Firefox web browsing, and then they start using it. And then they start liking it. And I've seen more people do that. Like, they're like, oh no, I'll be fine with just this minimum amount of space, and then they start becoming increasingly infuriated because they do not want to reinstall to repartition.
And they aren't comfortable using something like gparted to do it.
Yeah, it's like you can fix that, but it's one of those, like, if you get it right from the first place, you don't. It's at least right enough that you're not hitting your head against partition limits. Because at the end of the day, some things do need to be on the root directory. They just do. You can't put them over here, and then it's like it doesn't work that way. I forget on that. Does OpenSUSE do the 2 partitions, like most distros are doing now?
I can't remember. It's been a while since I did the 11.3 install. I've actually got the video out there somewhere.
Yeah. Like, because more and more distros now are doing where they install that small root partition and then everything else is the home partition, which is a good thing. But that root partition needs to be big enough for all the applications you're going to throw in it.
Right. Well, I know when you're doing the Arch install, it generally goes for 7,500 megs, which 7.5 gigs, that's sort of pushing it.
No.
For Arch is kind of minimal.
Well, no, it's I think the default on PC Linux for the root directory is 8 gig, and I actually agree with that because if you sit down there and start installing all those packages that are in the repository, you can use the 8 gig. That's.
Right. No, I was just saying I thought maybe 7 or 8 gigs was a little bit too small.
No, yeah, I was like, honestly, I like I said, I redid mine to be 20 gig. I didn't use the default, but like I'm a little bit more of a power user because I didn't ever.
That's what I was getting at earlier. Space is coming at such a premium now, where like this new computer I bought a few months ago, it came with a terabyte hard drive in it, and I looked on their site, and most of the new ones are coming with something that big, if not bigger.
Well, no, and if we're honest, a 2 terabyte hard drive is not even $100 at Best Buy, and Best Buy isn't the best priced, so it's like, so it's not like. Storage is that small. Where it gets to be a problem, though, is if you have a system that came with Windows and you don't want to erase Windows, and you don't have the Windows disk, because so many systems don't have these days. Now, honestly, though, one thing you might want to think about doing if you're on this thing and you're willing to spend like $100, is go down to Best Buy, buy a second hard drive. So you're not doing any repartitioning of any kind. Just make it easy on yourself. Stick things on there because the grub will let you boot into the other drives from there. And it'll mount them that way and everything else. So that's not necessarily a bad thing to think
actually,
about.
when I was making some of my earlier forays into Linux before I actually moved over, I had one hard drive that had Windows on it and one that had Linux, and I could actually set in the BIOS which one I wanted to boot to. That's a little different, but...
Well, no, it's like, and that was the way I used to have to do it, but honestly, Grub's gotten smart enough now that Grub will just automatically figure out, oh, this other drive has an OS on it, I should mount it. And it should be there. It should be ready to go. So you don't even necessarily do the BIOS thing. And there's an advantage to that if you're dealing with a temperamental Windows install, you don't have to make any modifications to the actual disk at all. But it's 6.5 dozen there.